If you like the podcast, don't forget to check us out on Instagram at What Happens in the Crypt. We're also on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.
Hey there, cave dwellers, goblins, and climbers.
This is episode 10 of What Happens in the Crypt. Today we're talking about the 2004 horror movie The Descent, written and directed by Neil Marshall. Marshall describes this film as a descent into madness and a physical descent into the depths of the earth.
Spooky.
Very spooky.
Trigger warnings for this episode include gore and claustrophobia.
A year after her family is killed in an accident, Sarah and her friends travel to North Carolina to explore caves. The women find strange cave paintings and evidence of an earlier expedition, then learn that they are not alone. Underground predators inhabit the crevices, and they have a taste for human flesh.
Dun, dun, dun. An interesting production note is director Neil Marshall did not want to do this movie at first. After seeing success with his first movie, Dog Soldiers, he did not want to be typecast as a horror director. He laid out changes to the original idea for him to do the movie. Included in the revisions was an all-female cast because it didn't happen too often.
This movie has a really jarring beginning. We pretty much just meet the characters. They're coming off of this whitewater rafting trip. And as soon as they're leaving, there's this horrific car accident where Sarah, who's the main character, her husband and daughter get impaled through the head. Both of them, the husband at least, by this Final Destination shit of this car in front of them having a bunch of metal spikes.
Never drive behind trucks with the tied cargo. No.
It's definitely gonna come back and impale you.
Definitely.
No other option.
This was actually the first time I've seen this whole movie because I didn't know that was happening.
Yeah, that's kind of shocking for you.
Never seen the beginning before.
Comes out of nowhere. Sarah's husband and daughter both die in this crazy accident, and the movie flash forwards to a year later, and now the same girls from the rafting trip are getting ready to go caving together.
Is that the term, caving?
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that.
Because it's not rock climbing, it's jumping in caves. It's caving.
I just imagined a bunch of, a group of friends walking into a cave, jumping up and down, and then leaving. The scene that always stresses me out is when Sarah gets stuck at the beginning of the tunnel, and it right away starts to collapse. That is one of my worst nightmares.
I can't... I'm dying. I can't fucking breathe.
Just listen to me. Listen to me. What are you afraid of? What are you so afraid of? You can move. Sarah, look at me. Look at me. Listen, the worst thing that could have happened to you has already happened, okay? And you're still here. This is just a poxy cave, and there's nothing left to be afraid of, I promise, okay? Okay?
And you see this in other horror movies, and I really feel like The Descent was the first to do this. But we recently watched As Above, So Below, and there's almost an identical scene where the dude is crawling through a cave crevice, shoulder.
Crypt. They're crawling through the catacombs.
Yeah, the catacombs, and he's shoulder to shoulder between the wall and the floor, and it starts to collapse and crush him.
That is why I'm going to stay away from caves.
I like them.
I'm not a bat. Once in the cave, the girls quickly discover that they are not alone, and almost in Scooby-Doo-like fashion, scatter. Because, that's always a good idea.
That's always the best plan when there's some murderous monster after you. Separate.
In the pitch black darkness, you just run away from each other.
One of the girls, Holly, gets attacked and her throat gets ripped out.
After being bitten, the creatures start to drag her to, I don't even know wherever they feast. But then Juno grabs onto the body and eventually starts swinging her climbing pick. I think that's what you would call it, right? It's kind of like a ice
pickaxe,
pick or pickaxe thing. and she starts swinging it around, and she eventually kills one of the creatures.
While Juno's in like the heat of the moment after attacking these monsters and trying to protect her friend, she feels something behind her and she whips around with the axe and accidentally stabs her friend Beth through the neck.
What I want to know is, okay, your friend just kills this horrifying creature and is freaking out, and you decide to sneak up on him.
Just quietly linger in the background.
Yeah, why? Give her at least like a good job or something so they know you're there.
Like,
I don't know.
Hello, excuse me,
Hello?
Juno, I'm standing here.
Yeah. Protect me too. I don't know, something.
As Beth is falling, she reaches for Juno and ends up grabbing her necklace, and she's holding it as she falls. My favorite scene in this movie is later on when they are all definitely separated. A few of them have been eaten and killed by the monsters, and Sarah is alone. And she comes across this lake within the cave, and we think from the lighting that it's just red, and she hears these crawlers coming, and she ends up going into the water to hide, and we realize that it's actually this like gigantic pool of blood.
Actually, that is very metal.
It's super metal.
Because it's also surrounded by bones, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like almost like their little graveyard. This scene is really iconic, and even if you haven't seen this movie, you've probably seen pictures of this, because it's this really dramatic woman covered in blood holding a torch in this cave, and it's really badass.
This scene also has the added suspense of her playing dead, because some of the one creature shows up and even steps on her head, or is it places his hand on her head, something like that.
Well, I mean, they kind of walk on all fours.
Yeah,
So
they
you
do
could
kind of
call
walk
that
on all
stepping
fours.
on
Yeah,
her
yeah.
head.
Either way, terrifying.
Yeah. Pretty shortly after the bloodbath scene, we realize that it's only Sarah and Juno that are still alive on this little caving trip. There ends up being a confrontation between the two women when Sarah confronts Juno with this necklace that Beth had earlier, which proved that Juno was having an affair with Sarah's husband, which was just a separate storyline. And the crawlers are coming after them, and instead of banding together to fight, Sarah ends up pickaxing Juno through the leg to leave her as like bait for the crawlers so she can escape.
Before we get into the ending scene, we have to mention that there are two of them. This is a UK movie, and it first aired in the UK, but when it was brought to the US, it was given a separate ending that is a minute shorter.
In the UK release, Sarah hallucinates seeing her daughter blowing out birthday candles before it fades, and she sees it's just her torch, and she's actually stuck in the cave.
The US ending is lame.
It's still good.
I actually like the UK ending way more. The US ending cuts out that last minute. So in the US ending, she just escapes.
And there is like a final jump scare at the very end where she sees Juno in the car.
Yeah, but it's a happy ending still.
Right, but when they screened this in the US, they found that full ending too depressing, and they wanted to end it on a happier note, hence the US ending, she escapes, and in the UK one, she doesn't.
People from the US. Cowards. Cowards! Something that I love about this movie, that I love with all movies that make this decision, is that there is no CGI. All of the creatures in this movie are practical. It was decided that it was going to be all actors, in fact, and not stuntmen. They originally intended to show the creatures more, and they wanted every creature to feel unique.
The actresses in the movie also were not shown what the crawlers were going to look like. So that very first scene where they see them was really their first time having any clue what the monsters were going to look like.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Me too. It adds another level of like, I'm sure it added stress to them while they're filming all these other scenes, knowing that at some point a monster is going to pop out and they have no like frame of reference of what it's going to look like.
Yeah, even like after the first day, I'm sure they're still not used to it. So like, they've only seen them on set in this really, because the set is dark. So like they've only seen it in this setting. So I'm sure it took them a couple shots, couple takes, couple days to get used to it.
Yeah, because they're spooky. Like, it would scare me if I didn't know that that's what was coming.
And they all don't look exactly the same, too.
Another interesting tactic they used for this movie was the use of matte paintings to create the wider cave shots, which we've talked about in previous episodes. They paint a large landscape so that they don't have to fill it in with CGI or try to actually film anything in a gigantic cave. They just fill it in with the painting. The director, Marshall, refers to the 6 women in the movie as the 6 chicks with picks.
I believe he actually referred to them that, like, on set.
Which I love. I think it's adorable and it's endearing, and that's what they are. They're 6 badass chicks with picks.
The actresses didn't want to do CG in this movie, and it was actually considered for the beginning white water rafting scene. But instead, they actually took training and lessons.
Which is super cool, because if I was an actress in a movie and they were like, the first scene is going to be whitewater rafting, but we're going to use a stunt person.
Yeah,
I
they
would
said
have
stunt person or CG. It was both.
Right, I would have been like, excuse me, please show me how to whitewater raft so I can do this, because I'm a badass woman.
They even took climbing and caving lessons as well.
And this was really important, too, to make it look more believable in the scenes in the actual movie, because there aren't any stunt people. So if these actresses hadn't been able to practice, like, holding the lines and hooking things together, it might have looked really awkward, but they made sure to go through the training to really set them up for that.
Yeah, a lot of kung fu movies have to use stunt doubles, and, well, I mean, a lot of movies use stunt doubles, and you can always tell because it will cut to a lot of shots of, like, their profile or just the back.
Head. Yeah.
And you have to shoot it completely differently. It's
right.
you always know, you're like, yeah, they're not doing it.
Yeah, so that's a really cool thing about this movie, is that not that there's so many stunts, so to speak, but that they actually learned how to use all this equipment and do it correctly. The makeup was designed by effects and prosthetics designer Paul Hyatt, and the crawler makeup actually took upwards of 5 hours to fully apply, which made the actors so uncomfortable that they had to find a way to streamline it, cutting it down to 3.5 hours.
That's still so long to be sitting in a chair, I imagine. 3.5 hours. And I wonder how many they had on set, like, in one day.
Right.
Like, that would take so long.
And it's not even sitting in a chair, because
they had the stand, too. It's full body.
It's full body. So they were, like, airbrushed. They had to put all those little veins on. They had to stand up for,
and they wear, like, contacts and stuff, too.
Right. The contacts, all the prosthetics on the face, like the ears and anything to, like, make the chin jut out, all of that stuff. It's an intense makeup.
Yeah, that's crazy that they could streamline it even, like, to 3.5 hours, like.
Right. I saw an interview with him, and he didn't say how he did it. He just was like, the actors hated sitting for 5 hours, so we made it 3.5. So I don't know if that means that they cut out something that they were doing, or because the movie is so dark, maybe they did less detail, but yeah.
But even that is insane, because they gave all of the creatures unique faces. So, like, they all don't have the same teeth. They don't all have the same scars. Some have, like, bigger ears than the others. That alone adds a whole bunch of time.
Yeah. It's intense.
The makeup was inspired by Nosferatu and was supposed to look semi-bat-like.
Marshall really wanted it to look plausible that cavemen who were trapped in the cave system could eventually evolve over generations to become these crawlers. The design for the crawlers almost took a totally different direction. Before they ended up with, like, the milky contact lenses, they actually had these gigantic bug eyes the same makeup, but instead of contacts, they had eye prosthetics that really looked like a cartoon of, like, a little green alien, like, that big of eyes. And they were really comical bug-like looking. And especially when it comes down to the idea of they've evolved and they only have hearing, didn't make any sense that their eyes would get bigger.
They would get
but
smaller.
You can find pictures of what they almost did, and it would have totally changed the tone of the movie.
Yeah, I didn't actually see those pictures, but I like what they ended up with a lot.
Me too.
Because it makes sense. Because if they're only relying on hearing and smelling, they're not going to use their eyes.
They should have big ears, not big eyes.
Yeah.
They also did a full body cast of the actress who plays Holly. She's the one that falls and breaks her leg and then later on is like thrown over a cliff by a crawler. And she said that she actually kept the head of her lifelike dummy after shooting ended.
You've got to. Of course. Like, I would definitely ask for that.
I mean, I want someone to make a full body cast of me for no reason, just so I can have my own head.
The cave expedition that they go on was supposed to take place in North Carolina. And actually, not one single shot in this movie was even shot in the United States. They never stepped foot into the United States. Every exterior shot you see in this movie was actually shot in Scotland. It was decided very early on that filming in real caves would be too dangerous and difficult, so all the caves would be built on a soundstage. There are 6 sets that were built, and they were reused and changed to look like 21 different areas in total. All of these caves were built in Pinewood Studios near London.
This was really clever, too, because you cannot tell when you watch this movie that it's only 6 different like cave settings. And one of the interviews I saw, they were talking about how they would add stalagmites and stalactites to the actual set to make it look different, and they would make it dry in some scenes and wet in other scenes, and they would tilt it all to make it look different just because they were working with those 6 and that was all they had.
I wouldn't have even guessed that they built any sets. I was like, no, they're in a cave.
Yeah, it looks like they're really
It does look like they're in a cave. But I also read that's why they lit it the way they did. They were only using headlamps and flashlights and actual, like, flares and stuff.
Right.
So it makes sense.
Yeah, Marshall said something along the lines of he didn't want to use any lighting that they wouldn't have had. So if the thought was she fell in a hole and she had a box of matches, they tried to only light it with a box of matches.
This whole movie was shot in 7 weeks.
The director, Marshall, also said that this film was inspired by his 3 favorite horror movies, Alien, The Shining, and Deliverance.
Yeah, you can definitely see all of those in this movie, especially, in my opinion, Alien. You can see a lot of Alien in this movie.
See, all I see is Deliverance.
Because it's like the themes and similar imagery, but Alien is all dark, wet cave.
Right, and
that's the movie.
And Deliverance is like unknown hillbilly monster that's going to take you.
Yeah, Alien is more so like the unknown. It's, you don't know this. There's a monster, an entity. You have no idea what it is, and it's trying to kill you, like this movie. And you know, you watched Alien. Mm-hmm. The whole ship is wet and dark and
right.
strange. And also, she kind of climbs through ducts and...
For sure.
Yeah.
And both The Shining and Alien are trapped movies. They're both where there's no escape.
There's no escape,
you're snowed in at the hotel or you're in space with this alien. So it makes sense. The actress that played Sam was, in fact, actually really afraid of the dark.
Bad movie for that.
Yeah, and the woman
no, you get a better performance. Great movie for that.
And the woman that played Sarah was truly claustrophobic.
I wonder if they asked her that ahead of time. Because that is also perfect. Like, you would get, real expressions and reactions from her.
Right, it makes sense, and I just imagine if I was claustrophobic, I would never want to do a movie where I was going to be fake stuck in a cave, but maybe it's like exposure therapy.
True fear. You can't get, because it's hard to fake fear.
True.
And if it's real, that's not even acting at that point.
It'd be really easy to put yourself in the mindset of you're stuck if you're really afraid of getting stuck. The sand that they used on set was actually so sharp and coarse that the crawlers and the actresses would get minor cuts from wrestling in these scenes where they were actually fighting. And one of the actors that played a crawler was joking that he's actually going to look like a crawler by the time the movie was done filming because his legs were so beat up.
That would get so old so fast. Because, it's not... No scene is one and done. You're shooting every fight scene, 3 or 4 times. You're getting thrown around all over the place. You're going to have cuts all over you.
Yeah, and filming this as an actor sounds like it would have been miserable because they were wet most of the time, too. Ugh. So it was cold, it was wet, and oh, surprise, the ground is going to cut you.
Another interesting tidbit about this movie is that it was released early. The production company actually caught wind that there was an American movie with a similar theme coming out, and it was supposed to be released before The Descent was. This movie was actually called The Cave. And I had never heard about it.
And it bombed.
But there's no way that they could have known it was going to bomb. So when they found this out, they released The Descent intentionally early, which is a risk.
It makes sense, though, because if you knew that a movie was coming out called The Cave and you're working on a movie that's all about a spooky cave with monsters, you're going to want to make sure yours is the first spooky cave movie to come out.
If you're making this movie and they announce a movie called The Cave, you're like, this movie is 90% cave.
Yeah, our movie's The Cave.
We got to release it first. Actually, this happens a lot.
Today we have our first guest. So we've been asking friends and family of ours what their favorite movie is and asking them to come on the podcast. So today we have Chelsea, who is my twin sister and is also me and Sean's roommate.
Hi everyone, I'm Chelsea, Christy's twin. I'm a lifelong horror movie fan, so I'm really excited, and The Descent is one of my favorite movies.
Do you remember the first time that you saw this movie?
This movie came out in 2004?
2005.
2005. I probably saw this when I was like 13 or 14 years old. I think we rented it from Blockbuster, honestly. So that was way before Blockbuster went out of business and everything. And I remember just being so scared by this movie, and that scare definitely stuck with me. Every time I see this movie, it scares me in a different way.
What do you find scary about this movie?
As my twin sister and Sean as my roommate, I am terrified of the dark. I'm 27 years old and I still sleep with a nightlight, and I have to have a flashlight within arm's reach at all times. So the fact that people are stuck underground where there's no light, that terrifies me. And then there's also these man-eating creatures coming to eat them. I mean, that's just terrifying.
I knew about the nightlight, but I did not know you have a flashlight.
Yeah, well, I've got a flashlight in my desk right next to my bed.
You have more than one nightlight, don't you?
Yeah.
We're just clarifying.
How many nightlights are
How many nightlights do you have?
2.
What scenes have stuck with you the most? What would you say are your favorite scenes?
Definitely the part where, and honestly, I forget which one of the girls is screaming it, but she's like, "Hello, is anyone there?" And she's screaming it, and then it pans to her, and one of those creatures is directly behind her. Makes me jump every time. And I've seen this movie 10 times, and that scares me so bad. And then also the part where Sarah is in the tunnel and it collapses on her. I hate that. I hate it so much. I hate the idea of being trapped and buried alive.
Hello! Please! Is there anybody there? Hello!
It's always good when a movie, you can watch a movie more than once and then it can stress you out every single time or scare you every single time.
Yeah, some movies really have that effect where you'll know exactly when the jump scare is going to happen and you'll anticipate it, and even so you'll jump. Whenever I watch Hereditary, I jump out of my skin every single time, no matter what.
Yeah, but which part? There's so many parts of that movie that are unsettling and scary. Oh, God.
Every part.
for me, I'm not going to go on a tangent. Hereditary, don't make me do that. He slams his head on the desk, though.
That's a different episode.
Different
someday.
episode. We'll talk about that movie soon. So have you seen both endings?
So I haven't. So I've only seen the US ending, and I didn't even know there was a second ending, honestly. I'll have to like Google it after we're done here. I need to see it.
Do you like the idea of that ending more, or being from the US, do you like the US ending more?
I like the UK one more. I think it should end on a morbid note. I don't think every horror movie needs to have this happy ending where there is someone who survives. Why can't they all just die?
Your
Hashtag why can't they all just die?
I think that like the US version is supposed to be like Sarah is this character who's undergone so much tragedy that she doesn't need to die. She's already been through her pain, and this is, she's going through more pain, but she's becoming a different person from it. I think that's the take on it.
But like I get that, but also there doesn't need to be a happy ending. This movie from beginning to end is not happy. I mean, it starts with the entire family getting impaled. I mean, it's just not a happy movie. So like why should it end on a happy ending? Why can't she be stuck in the caves,
That's not a feel-good ending.
I like the UK ending more because she has to basically kill her friend to escape. So why does she deserve a happy ending?
Right, yeah. And I wouldn't even say that she double-crossed her, because I can't say that she doesn't deserve it. I mean, it was definitely hinted she was sleeping with her husband, but like...
But does that equal
Murder?
Well, I guess if you're in a do or die situation, I mean, are you gonna die, or are you gonna let someone who was like sleeping with your husband die?
True, but she doesn't know that she was going to die.
I guess that's true.
There's a lot of horror movies and shows that do something similar. For example, The Walking Dead does this. I think it's like season 1 or 2. Very early on in the show, the character Shane does this. Him and one other character are running from zombies, and he shoots the one guy because he hurts his ankle, and it's like this heavier guy who can't run very fast. He shoots this guy in the leg so he can escape, because he's like, we're both going to die. But with that show, it was immediate. He's the bad guy. He shouldn't have done that. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that this movie is like, nah, her friend deserved it.
Right.
Right.
There's a fan theory that when Sarah's husband and daughter died, she actually just went insane and murdered all of her friends in the cave, and that there were no crawlers. Have you heard about this, or do you have any thoughts about it?
I haven't heard about this either. And I read so much.
So actually, Marshall, the director, said that there was a scene in the very beginning in the hospital where she sees a shadow of a crawler, but he was afraid that people would think that this was the case, so they cut it out. But he said that he entertains this theory.
That's really interesting. Actually that would work with both endings, I guess, because she would get trapped down there in the UK ending and just die, or she'd get out. That's really interesting. Wow, you know what? I kind of like that, though. I do.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
But if that was the case, I wish they would have leaned harder into it.
Right, and I don't think that it actually was the intention, but that's, like, what people were saying, and he kind of just said, like, it could be, like...
But God, I wish that was the movie. I would have liked it a lot more. I liked this movie, but, like, that would have been so much cooler.
But, like, then the ending would be her waking up in a hospital bed or something, and then like, a cop coming in and being like, well, why did you kill all your friends? And then that's such a cliche ending.
Yeah, there's a lot of things it could have been, but it wasn't.
I do think it's interesting, though, that he had shot a scene where there was a shadow of a crawler, and then when they finished the movie or when they were editing it, he was like, we need to take that out because that puts too much doubt on the rest of the story.
Yeah, I like that. You know what? The next time I watch that movie, I'll like keep that in the back of my head and watch it in that frame of mind and see if it changes the movie, because that's really interesting.
if you ran into a family member or a friend who had never seen this movie, how would you pitch it? Like, what would you say to them? Like, why you should check this out because, what would you say?
Because it has a really, really kick-ass, like, leading ladies. I mean, it's very rare that in horror movies they're all leading ladies and there's not one dumb one. I mean, that is really cool. I think that is a really strong, I don't know what I want to say, like a strong contender for this being such a good movie, is because that's very uncommon.
That's true. We didn't actually say that at all.
Like none of the tropes.
Yeah, there's none of the tropes.
Like, none of them are stupid. They're all smart. They're all strong. They all just die. So I would say that that's really cool because that's really unusual. But the other thing, too, is, like, even if you're not claustrophobic, I think that this movie will make you claustrophobic. But it kind of has everything that you would want in a horror movie. It has kick-ass people. It has scary monsters. It has impending doom feeling when you're watching it. It kind of has everything you would want in a horror movie.
Yeah, and there's more than one aspect that is scary. Like, it's got the dark, the claustrophobic, the monster. There's a lot to it.
For sure.
Yeah, that's good. You sold me again. Let's watch it. All right, are you ready for the last question?
You guys have been, like, teasing me about this last question, and I have no idea what it is.
All right.
I'm ready. Go for it.
If you were in this movie, do you think you would survive?
Oh, fuck no. Oh, my God. No way. I would not survive. Okay. No, I wouldn't, because I would be the one panicking in the corner because I'm terrified of the dark, and I'd be like, I can't see anything. And if I was ever separated from anybody I went with, I would be freaking out. I would not be calm at all. I would be the one screaming, like that part where Juno is like screaming for everybody. That would be me, and I'd get eaten, like 100%. What do you think? Do you guys think you'd survive?
I would go down kicking and screaming.
Yeah, same. I don't know if I
could.
could.
The shit out of a crawler. I'm strong, and I would get pretty far, I think.
Yeah, I was also wondering in this movie, I was like, I wonder how tall they would actually be. I don't know, I'm 6'1", I think I could take a couple.
Yeah, they look little.
I'm 5 feet tall, so, and like chubby. There's no way I would be able to make it. I'm also very, very weak.
How long, so how long do you think you would have made it in? What is this movie, an hour and a half?
Yeah.
How long do you think you would have made it into the cave?
So you've entered the cave. You've hiked around a little. You see the first crawler. How much longer do you think you have to live?
Like, honestly, here's the thing. So, I feel like I would live like maybe 30 minutes, like total. And I think that's being generous because I really would be freaking out the whole time. And I wouldn't even be in that situation to begin with. There's no way I'd be cave diving or anything like that. Like that is not a scenario I would ever be in the first place. But no, I would say maybe 30 minutes, probably a lot shorter.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Thank you for joining us today and being our first guest. I know I will see you on the couch next to us because you are next to us when we watch all of these horror movies.
And I will be happy to watch them all with you guys.
I personally really love this movie. It also had the opposite effect on me, like most of these horror movies do, where instead of being terrified of caves, I now really want to go caving. Just like after watching The Blair Witch, I wanted to go backpacking.
Overall, I do like this movie. It does have its ups and downs, and that's not a joke about them falling or cave
being underground.
diving or being underground. There are some close call moments and scares that I think are kind of weak, and I'm not a big fan of the United States ending. But overall, I love the creatures. I love the set design. The story's good. The characters are good. I just think overall it's a good movie. Not great, but I like it. I mean, I've seen it 3 times. Mm-hmm. Although this past one was the first time I watched the whole thing. And I definitely do not want to go in caves. I think I don't know how it had the opposite effect on you. I don't even want to see a cave for a while now.
I'm all about it. I'm ready to hop into a cave, crawlers or not.
I'll go into like a 10-foot deep cave. That's it. This week we have 7 cave casualties.
Paul, who is Sarah's husband, is impaled by a metal pipe in that very dramatic and jarring car accident, and so is Jessica, Sarah's daughter. Holly is killed by a crawler ripping her neck out.
And dragged into God knows where.
Beth is impaled through the neck with the pickaxe by Juno, but later she's mercy killed by Sarah with a rock.
All I'm going to say about that part is you could not live that long taking a pickaxe to the throat. But whatever, it's a movie.
It's just a movie. Sam's throat is sliced, and we assume she eventually died of blood loss. Rebecca has one of the more graphic deaths where her stomach is eaten by a crawler.
That seems pretty metal. Well, I'll say that louder. That seems pretty metal.
Juno is stabbed in the leg by Sarah, and we assume left to be eaten by the crawlers.
I would have liked a shot of her just taking out a couple.
On her way out.
Juno?
Yeah.
Yeah. On her, she's gonna die, but I'd like to see her take out a couple more.
I'm sure she did. She was a badass fighter.
You can rent this on Amazon Prime for $3.99, but it doesn't really make sense to do that because you can just buy it for $4.99.
You'll want to watch it more than once.
For our next episode, we'll be doing our first Shudder original, the 2019 horror anthology Scare Package.